Slaughtering process?
Well, I don't think there is an ethical way to slaughter an animal which doesn't want to die.
Yeah, I know, but meat tastes good.
Meat tastes good, but does that outweigh the value of the life of the animal?
That's a hard question. Yeah. I see your point.
So I'm asking people if they can explain what animal abuse means to them.
Sure, yeah. Well, my assumption of animal abuse is the exploitation of animals for maybe economic purposes or for pleasure purposes, I think. So, for example, dog fighting would be one. Probably fox hunting is another. I think is another form of animal abuse. But I can't think of any more other forms.
So the other question you saw was, is animal abuse justified if it gives us pleasure? So what's your thoughts on that?
I don't think it is, no. Unless it can provide a meaningful resource, as in food or in to do some mechanical work, like in farming. Like we use animals all the time to do that, but that's not abusing or using animals for sake of pleasure. That's using animals to perform a certain function,
right.
If that makes sense. But certain things like like I said, fox hunting or dog fighting, that's not completely unjustified. No.
You say like meaningful, if they're being used meaningfully.
Yeah.
Do you think if there's an alternative which doesn't involve an animal and that animal being abused, then that we should choose that option?
Can you give me an example?
So, you say with food, you could argue that it's meaningful to get nutrition, but then we don't need animal products to live healthily. We can have plant-based alternatives which don't include the suffering and exploitation of that animal.
I disagree with that. No, I think we
What point?
There are meat alternatives, but they don't provide as much nutritional value as meat products. You can obviously get some protein from beans and stuff like that, but it's not. But they're not being abused as such. Some meat industries do abuse animals, correct? Like in some parts of Europe, like the way pigs are treated is terrible, caged hens, etc. But there are ways to eat meat which is more ethical, I think, free range, etc.
Well, did you know, like free range chickens, those chickens are still being slaughtered at a very, very young age, usually around 30 weeks. And they get slaughtered in the same way as industrial farm chickens, which is they're hung upside down, dropped in a pool of water to be electrified and stunned, and then they get their necks cut. Well, often they wake up for their stunning, or they miss the water, so they're conscious for their death.
Sure.
So these animals, even if they're having better welfare, they're still being abused. Would you agree with that? Like the unnecessary slaughter of an animal, I'd classify as abuse.
I think it's a necessary slaughter of an animal.
Because we don't need to consume them.
Because we do. Like chicken is a staple food for many peoples around the world, including our own culture.
But we don't need to consume it to live healthily. We can get our nutrition from plant-based alternatives.
There is an argument for that, but I think. But the thing is, I think there are valid arguments for that. However, I don't think you're going to convince people to not eat meat. I think human beings are omnivorous creatures. We're always going to eat meat.
Well, omnivorous, so in a time of necessity we can eat meat, but we don't need to live healthily. Omnivores don't need to consume meat.
Correct.
So in a time where, like we are in this society, where we have food readily accessible at most supermarkets, and we don't need to consume meat, and we're not in a time of necessity where some cultures are. I'm talking about people in this culture where we can have plant-based alternatives, and it's better for our health, and it's often cheaper if we're getting it from Whole Foods. So in our situation, when we can not be partaking in putting our money towards those unethical practices.
Sure.
Would you agree that we should be making those more compassionate choices?
I do agree. Yeah, I can't argue with that. I just think from a practical point of view, are you really going to convince people to stop eating meat?
Well, let's say not people generally. What about yourself? Because
I mean, I think I'll be convinced to eat more sustainable and ethical sources of meat. Which, and I do that, in which animals are reared and slaughtered in more ethical ways.
What's an ethical way to slaughter an animal?
Actually, I don't know that. There's got to be some way in which, the pain of an animal is reduced significantly compared to the ones you described, which are terrible. I admit that. That there is if that is the case where chickens are slaughtered like that, then of course I don't support it. But there has to be alternative ways in which they're slaughtered in more painless manner, as it were.
Right, but farm on the scale that we are, and even, I say, even with these small-scale farming, small-scale farms, they do send them to the same slaughterhouses, and they get killed in the same way. And I think it's done that way because monetarily it wouldn't make sense to let them live longer lives. They wouldn't be able to get the same financial gain. Again, I don't think there is a way to ethically or humanely slaughter an animal when ultimately they don't want to be killed.
That is correct. There is no ethical way of slaughtering animals but that's unfortunately the nature of reality. We are like I said, we are omnivorous creatures. Like every other omnivorous and or carnivorous creatures, we have to kill meat for our survival. And
we don't. I'm telling you, we don't need to live healthily. We don't need to consume animal products. And if we're not killing them in humane ways, and there isn't that alternative, there is still an alternative of consuming plant-based food, where you don't have to kill an animal at all.
Can you give an example of some plant-based foods that are good alternatives to meat?
Okay, well, so if you want meat alternatives which give the texture and taste of meat, there's loads out there which are usually made of, say, soy protein or pea protein. There's countless ones if you go into supermarkets now, especially in Bristol, but in loads of cities. There's plant-based alternatives. But I'm encouraging people to eat mostly whole foods because that's better for our health, it's better environmentally, and it's better for it's less pollution goes into that, and it's less processed.
I get that. It's less energy intensive.
Exactly. That's what I'm going for.
I am technically for that, and ethically for that. I just think it's going to be difficult to try and convince people to change their entire lifestyle in order to care for these animals, which I think unfortunately the majority of people care more about humans than animals.
Right.
And I admit that I care more about humans than animals. And so there's an argument the environmental case for eating these plant-based substances is stronger for me because that actually has human consequences, right? As opposed to the ethical welfare of the animal, which is important. I get that, but where my moral compass lies, I care more about humans.
Okay,
does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'd say that you don't have to. By caring about humans, that doesn't necessarily mean we can't care about animals. We care about both at the same time. But say if you're going from the human perspective, for the health of people, it's far better to be consuming plant-based food.
Yes.
It reduces the risk of heart disease, cancers, things like that. And from the environmental point of view, animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change. It causes a third of emissions. So for the planet, choosing plant-based food individually and as a society is the best thing we can be doing. So if that's the best kind of motivation for you, that's still a very valid motivation.
I think that's a good argument. I mean, so my argument. Okay, so my question to you is: do you think there are ethical ways to rear animals which are less detrimental to the environment or animal welfare? You know, for example, eating or sourcing meat that's local and organic, and you know.
At the moment, I don't think so, because even local organic meat is still has the same practices of taking calves away from mothers, slaughtering in the same ways that we are with, you know, like gassing pigs, cutting throats of chickens and cows, and you know, we don't have a harmonious relationship with these animals. I think potentially there could be a way of living very like co-inhabiting with animals, and I think animals can be very necessary for the environment with grazing, and like it can be very good for the environment. I don't know how that would work with
sustainable forms of agriculture.
I don't know how that would work with consuming animal products. So I think we have to change the relationship we have with them.
Sure.
And if people start like selling meat, that's when it goes onto an industrial scale and people start profiting, and the relationship starts to become this dominating exploitation relationship.
Which is what it is technically now.
At the moment, so I'm advocating that people completely abstain from eating animal products, because in our current farming practices, there is no way to farm animals with like ethically and with their kind of welfare and their kind of life in mind.
I do disagree with that. I think there are many forms of agriculture which do rear animals in a much more ethical way.
But again, the slaughter practices are the same.
Okay, and therefore there should be more better regulations on slaughter practices. You know, if the government can legislate, either from a sort of a European EU level, or obviously we're not in the EU now, but like if the British government can legislate better slaughtering practices, then will that solve the problem ethically for you? You know, if we have more ethical slaughtering practices.
Well, I don't think there is an ethical way to slaughter an animal which doesn't want to die.
Yeah, I know, but meat tastes good.
Meat tastes good, but does that outweigh the value of the life of the animal?
That's a hard question. I see your point.
So again, it goes back to necessity. In a society, if we needed to consume animal products, like we did at one point in our evolution to survive, then I think maybe you could justify it. But when we don't need to, and we have such abundant plant-based food which is nutritious and better for the environment, then I think we should be choosing those foods.
I mean, I can't disagree with that.
And I'm not trying to stump people. I'm just trying to start a conversation.
No, I know. It's good questions. These are good questions. Oh God. I don't know. I think I'm gonna leave it there. And, but it's been a good pleasure to converse with you.
You too as well. Thank you. Amber.
Nice to meet you. Joe.
Joe, nice to meet you. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you get notified when videos go up every Monday and Thursday. If you want to watch another conversation, here are a couple of options. And if you want to support my activism, there's a link in my profile to a page where you can buy me a coffee. Thanks.